Hi everyone. So now let's discuss with the new concepts on Apache Storm. So in order to implement Apache Storm, you need to have a development environment with you, right? So what is a development environment for Apache Storm? Storm basically has two modes of operation. One is local mode and second is remote mode. I repeat, Storm has two modes of operation, local mode and remote mode. In local mode, you need to develop and test the topologies completely in process on your local machine. Okay, so in local mode, you need to develop and test the topologies completely in process in your local machine. But in remote mode, you need to submit the topologies for execution on the cluster of machines. So that's the difference between a local mode and a remote mode. In the local mode, the execution happens on your local machine. Whereas in remote mode, you need to submit the topologies for execution on the cluster of machines. So Storm development environment has everything installed on it so that you can develop and test the topologies in the local mode, package the topologies for execution on the remote cluster, and then you can submit the topologies on the remote cluster. So while developing, you need to develop it locally and then you can package it and then you can deploy it on the remote cluster. So the same code that you write to execute the Storm in a local fashion also works when it is deployed on the remote cluster. Okay, so a Storm cluster, when we say, which is a cluster of machines, it is managed by a master node. I repeat, so a Storm cluster is managed by a master node, which is called Nimbus. So your machine communicates with Nimbus to submit your code and the topologies for executing them on the cluster. And Nimbus will take care of distributing that code around the cluster and assigning the workers to run your topology. So worker, as we have seen in the previous session of us, which is a guy who executes your tasks. So the worker processes, executes your task, and the Nimbus will take care of distributing the code that you submit to Nimbus onto the cluster and also assigning the workers to run your topology. Okay, so your machine uses a command line client called Storm, which communicates with the Nimbus. Okay, and the Storm client is only used for the remote mode. It is not used for developing and testing the topologies locally. So as we have said, there are two modes of Storm development. One is local and one is remote. So for the local mode, we don't use Storm client. Storm client is only used for the remote mode, wherein it communicates with the Nimbus, who is like a master node who manages execution of your topology on the cluster of nodes. Clear? So we have just discussed a bit on the development environment. Now I have mentioned here a link wherein it has all the Storm stable releases out there. So you can download the latest stable Storm release on your machine. You can unzip that particular release, and then whatever is the bin path, there will be a bin folder of you after you unzip, and whatever is the bin path, that you need to add it to your path variable, okay, on your machine where you are developing the Storm. Okay, then there is a very important file here which is storm.yml. So storm.yml is a very important configuration file of a Storm. Okay, So if you want to submit the topologies to the remote cluster from your machine, you should install Storm Release locally. Then installing a Storm Release will give you a Storm client that you can use to interact with the remote clusters. To install Storm locally, you need to download the release from this link what I have mentioned here. Then you need to unzip it on your computer, and then after unzipping, as I've said, you will get a bin directory. You need to add that to your path, and please make sure that bin Storm script is a executable script, because Storm you need to execute in your console. Okay, so in the previous step, meaning in this particular step, you have installed Storm client on your machine, which will be used to communicate with the Storm clusters, right? Now all you need to do is tell the client which Storm cluster you need to talk to, because Apache Storm is a distributed environment. There will be many different Storm clusters implemented, many different topologies implemented. So when you install Storm client on your machine, you need to tell to which Storm cluster you need to talk to. Okay, so to do this, what you need to do is you need to put the host address of the Nimbus in storm.yml. So this storm.yml is a very important configuration file in which you can provide some details. So there will be a key called nimbus.host in storm.yml. So you need to provide the host address or the IP address of the Nimbus node where your Nimbus is running. Okay. Now we will discuss a bit more on creating a new Storm project. So there is a good news on a Storm project, that is there is one project called Storm-Starter. I repeat, there is a project called Storm-Starter which is available on the Storm website, Apache Storm website, and that project is in Eclipse. So you can download that project, okay, and open that project up in the Eclipse. So that Storm Starter project will help us in learning important concepts in Apache Storm. Okay, so what you need to do is first you need to add the Storm jars to the class path. Okay, so you need these Storm jars on your class path to develop the Storm topologies. So by now we know what do we mean by Storm topology, right? It's a directed acyclic graph of spouts and bolts. So in order to implement the Storm topologies, you need to add the Storm jars to your class path. So using Maven is highly recommended, okay, for setting up the entire project. Okay, so to set up the class path in Eclipse, you need to create a new Java project, okay, and then you need to include src/jvm as a source path. I repeat, to set up a class path in Eclipse, you need to create a new Java project and include src/jvm as a source path, and make sure that all the jars in lib and lib/dev are in the reference libraries section of the project. Okay, you need to set up the class path in the Eclipse. In order to set up the class path in Eclipse, first you need to create a new Java project, include src/jvm as a source path, and make sure all the jars in lib and lib/dev are in the reference libraries sections of your project. If you are using multiple language support, wherein if you want to implement spouts or bolts in a language which is other than Java, then those implementations should be under multi-lang resources folder, okay, of the project. So for Storm, to find these files in the local mode, the resources directory needs to be on the class path. You can do this in Eclipse by adding multi-lang folder itself as a source folder. You may also need to add multi-lang resources folder as a source directory. So as per my plan, I will give a demo of writing a Hello World application in a Storm end to end at the end of my lecture series, because I want you all to learn each and every concept that is involved in Apache Storm before we actually implementing an example, so that we should not have any questions in our mind. So at the end of the lecture series, I'll be demoing an application which is implemented in Java. Okay, so now let's again get back to the track of learning the important components of a Storm cluster. A Storm cluster is superficially similar to Hadoop cluster. On Hadoop, you run MapReduce jobs, whereas on Storm, you run topologies, right? In Hadoop, you run MapReduce jobs, and on Storm, you run topologies. So jobs and topologies themselves are very different. One key difference is that in case of MapReduce, okay, so the jobs and topologies, as I mentioned, are very different. One key difference is that MapReduce job eventually finishes, whereas topology processes run forever or until you kill it. So there are two kinds of nodes on a Storm cluster: the master node and the worker node. Okay, so in the Storm cluster there are two kinds of nodes. One is master node, okay, and worker nodes. So the master node runs a daemon called Nimbus that I have depicted in the diagram here. Okay, master node runs a daemon called Nimbus that is similar to Hadoop's job tracker. So this Nimbus is responsible for distributing the code around the cluster and assigning the tasks to the machines, and it also monitors for failures. So Nimbus is a very important component here because it is responsible for distributing the code around the cluster, assigning tasks to the machines, and monitoring them for failures. Each worker node, which I have mentioned here in the level 3 of my diagram, so each worker node runs a daemon called supervisor, and the supervisor listens to the work that is assigned to this machine, and it starts and stops the worker processes as necessary based on how Nimbus assigned the tasks to this particular node. Each worker process executes a subset of a topology, and running a topology consists of many worker processes spread across many machines. I repeat, each worker process executes a subset of a topology, and running a topology consists of many worker processes which are spread across many machines. So all this coordination between the Nimbus and the supervisors are done through a Zookeeper cluster. So the Nimbus daemon and the supervisor daemons are fail fast and stateless systems. So all the state is saved in the Zookeeper. This means you can kill the Nimbus or the supervisor and they'll start back up like nothing ever happened, because the entire state information is saved in Zookeeper. And this design leads to the Storm clusters being incredibly stable. Okay, because the entire state information resides in Zookeeper. That's why you can kill Nimbus supervisors anytime and they will come up as if nothing happened, because they have their state information saved in Zookeeper. Okay, now let's discuss the very important component Zookeeper that I mentioned on my previous slide. Now we know what is a Nimbus, now we know what is a supervisor. And both these important components of Apache Storm interacts with Zookeeper, which keeps the state information of the Nimbus and supervisors, right? So let's get into detail of Zookeeper before proceeding with Apache Storm. So the Zookeeper, the first question that comes to us is, what is this Zookeeper? So Zookeeper is a distributed open source coordination service for distributed applications. I repeat, Zookeeper is a distributed open source coordination service for distributed applications. It exposes a set of simple primitives that distributed applications can build upon to implement the high-level services for synchronization, configuration, maintenance, and groups and naming. It is designed to be easy for the program to and uses a data model after a familiar directory structure of file system. Okay, it is designed to be easy to program to and uses a data model that is styled after a very familiar directory tree structure of the file system. That is, the actual file system that we have on a PC, it tries to resemble that. It runs in Java and it has bindings for both Java as well as C language. Coordination services are bit hard to get right. They are especially prone to errors such as race conditions and deadlocks. The motivation behind Zookeeper is to relieve the distributed applications the responsibility of implementing the coordination services from scratch, because Zookeeper is giving you a fully ready coordination system, so that distributed applications that we implement, we need not have to bother about coordination, because we have a Zookeeper which does a coordination for you. Okay, that's why the motivation behind Zookeeper is to relieve the distributed applications from the responsibility of implementing the coordination services from scratch. So what are the important design goals of a Zookeeper? Zookeeper is simple. Zookeeper allows the distributed processes to coordinate with each other through a shared hierarchical namespace. I repeat, Zookeeper allows distributed processes to coordinate with each other through a shared hierarchical namespace, which is organized similar to how a standard file system is organized. So the namespace consists of data registers which are called Z nodes. Okay, so each data node is a Z node, and it is similar to a file or a directory in a direct file system. So this Z node is similar to a file or a directory in a file system. So unlike a typical file system which is designed for storage, Zookeeper data is kept in memory. This is very important point. Unlike a typical file system which is designed for a storage, Zookeeper data is kept in memory, which means Zookeeper can achieve high throughput and low latency numbers because it's in memory. The Zookeeper implementation puts a premium on high performance, high availability, and it is strictly ordered access. So the performance aspects of Zookeeper means it can be used in large distributed systems because it is a highly performing system. The reliability aspects keep it from being a single point of a failure because it's highly reliable. The strict ordering means that sophisticated synchronization can be implemented at the client. The second design goal of a Zookeeper is it is replicated. Just like the distributed processes, it coordinates, Zookeeper itself is intended to be replicated over a set of hosts called ensemble. Okay, so the Zookeeper is intended to be replicated as well, which is replicated over a set of hosts or machines called ensemble. Okay, so the servers that make up the Zookeeper service must all know about each other, because Zookeeper is replicated, right, and over the different nodes which are called ensembles. So the servers which make up the Zookeeper service, so all these ensembles together make up Zookeeper service. So Zookeeper service, when you say, each servers which make up this service must know about each other servers or each other ensembles. They maintain an in-memory image of a state of a Zookeeper. So along with the transaction logs and the snapshots in the persistent store. As long as majority of the servers are available, Zookeeper service is available. So client connects to a single Zookeeper server, and the client maintains a TCP connection through which it sends the requests, gets the responses back, gets the watch events, and it sends the heartbeats. If the TCP connection to the server breaks, the client will connect to a different server, because we have a set of servers making up our Zookeeper service. And that's where this replication helps us, right? So in this diagram I have mentioned about Zookeeper service, which consists of set of servers combined together. So even if one server is down, no issues, there are some other servers to take care of the clients. So in this set of servers, there is one server called leader. Okay, and there are different clients which are communicating with their respective ensembles. The next important design goal is Zookeeper is ordered. Zookeeper stems each update with a number that reflects the order of all Zookeeper transactions. This is very important. Zookeeper stems each update with a number that reflects the order of all Zookeeper transactions. So the subsequent operations can use the order to implement high-level abstractions such as synchronization primitives. So this ordering number helps us in synchronizing everything well. Next is Zookeeper is fast. It is especially fast in read-dominant workloads. Zookeeper applications run on thousands of machines, and it performs best when reads are more often than writes. Okay. So let's continue with more concepts on Zookeeper. So the data model and the hierarchical namespace of Zookeeper is as follows. I mentioned a small diagram here. So this is a root node which is depicted by a slash. So it's similar to the file system on Linux. So then this root node has two child nodes. One is named app1, second is named app2. But if you minutely read this particular name that's mentioned here, it is slash followed by app1, slash followed by app2. That means as you traverse the nodes, it takes the name of the node from which the path is coming from. So this particular node is named slash followed by app1. This is named as slash followed by app2. Now this node has three leaf nodes as its child nodes. So this is p underscore 1, this is p underscore 2, and this is p underscore 3. But the name that is assigned to it comes right from the root node. So name of this node is slash followed by app1 followed by p underscore 1. Name of this node is slash followed by app1 followed by p underscore 2. Name of this node is slash followed by app1 underscore p underscore 3. Okay, so this entire name comes as far as concatenating the nodes that we are traversing from. Okay, so this is how the file system is designed. in Zookeeper. So the namespace that is provided by a Zookeeper is much like the standard file system. So a name is sequence of paths which are separated by slashes. So name of this node is sequence of paths. It is coming from root. So from root f1 and then p underscore 1. That's why it's sequence of paths which are combined or connected to each other with a slashes. Okay. So every node in a Zookeeper namespace is identified by a path. So each node is having a path associated with it, which I have just written below the node. Okay. So let's discuss some points on nodes and ephemeral nodes. Unlike a standard file system, each node in a Zookeeper namespace can have a data associated with it as well as children. I repeat, each node in a Zookeeper namespace can have data associated with it as well as children's. It is like having a file system that allows a file to also be a directory. Zookeeper was designed to store the coordination data, status information, configuration, location information, etc. So the data that is stored in each node is usually small in the bytes to kilobytes range. So we use the term Z node to make it clear that we are talking about Zookeeper data nodes. Okay, so Z node is nothing but Zookeeper data nodes. Z nodes maintain a statical structure that includes the version numbers for the data changes that's happening. So each time a Z node's data changes, the version number increases. This is very important one. Each time the Z node's data changes, the version number associated with that node increases. For instance, whenever a client retrieves the data, it also receives the version of the data. So the data that is stored in each Z node in a namespace is read and written atomically. Reads get all the data bytes associated with a Z node and write replaces all the data. Each node has an access control list which restricts who can read what. Zookeeper also has a notion of ephemeral nodes. These nodes exist as long as the session that created the Z node is active. Ephemeral nodes exist as long as the sessions that created the Z node is active. When the session ends, the Z node is deleted. Ephemeral nodes are useful when you want to implement some feature which requires some such things. Okay. The next important point is Zookeeper is guaranteed. Zookeeper is very fast and very simple. Since its goal is to form a basis for constructing more complicated services, it definitely needs to provide some sort of guarantees. And what are those? Because until and unless Zookeeper provides a guarantee for the synchronization, no one will go to use it, right? So what are the different set of guarantees that a Zookeeper provides us? One is sequential consistency. I repeat, first guarantee that it provides is sequential consistency. That is, if you do an update from a client, it will be applied in the order they were sent. Meaning the order in which the updates were sent from the client, in the same order the updates will happen. That's why it guarantees that sequential consistency is retained. Second guarantee that it provides is atomicity. That is, updates are either successful or failure, no partial results. The third guarantee that it provides is single system image. A client will see the same view of a service regardless of the server that it is connected to. That is fascinating, right? Zookeeper service is actually provided by a set of ensembles or set of servers. But a client will see the same view of the service regardless of to which server it is connected to. Next guarantee is reliability. Once an update has been applied, it will persist from that time onwards forward until client overwrites the update. The next guarantee is timeliness. The clients view the system which is guaranteed to be up to date within certain time bound. Okay, so these are the different guarantees that it provides. First is sequential consistency. Second, atomicity. Third, it gives a single image of the entire system irrespective of which server you are talking to. Fourth, reliability. And fifth, timeliness. So the next feature of Zookeeper is it has a very simple APIs. One of the design goals of Zookeeper is to provide very simple programming interface. As a result, it supports only very few but crystal clear APIs. So what are those? First is create. Create API creates a node at a location in a tree. Second API is delete. It deletes a node in Zookeeper's hierarchical namespace. Third API is exists. It tests if a node exists at a particular location. API number 4 is get data. It reads the data from the node. API number 5 is set data. It writes the data to a node. API number 6 is get children. It retrieves a list of children nodes of a particular node. And API number 7 is sync. It waits for data to be propagated and synced. Okay. Now we'll discuss a bit on Zookeeper's components. Okay. So Zookeeper components shows high level components of the Zookeeper service, with the exception of request processor, which I have mentioned here. With the exception of request processor, each of the servers that make up a Zookeeper service replicates its own copy of each of the components. So the replicated database that's mentioned here is an in-memory database containing entire data tree. The updates are logged to a disk for recoverability, because if something crashes, we do have it on the file system. So hence the updates are logged to a disk for recoverability, and writes are serialized to disk before they are applied to in-memory database. Okay, writes are serialized to the disk before they are applied to in-memory database. Every Zookeeper server services the clients. Clients connect to exactly one server to submit the requests. Read requests are serviced from the local replica of each server database. Requests that change the state of the service, write requests are processed by an agreement protocol. As part of agreement protocol, all the write requests from the clients are forwarded to a single server called the leader. So in the previous slide, I had shown one server as a leader here, right? So the writes that happen from the clients are forwarded to a single server called a leader. The rest of the Zookeeper servers are called followers, which receives the message proposals from the leader and agree upon the message delivery. The messaging layer takes care of replacing the leaders on failures and synchronizing the followers with the leaders. Zookeeper uses a custom atomic messaging protocol. Since the messaging layer is atomic, Zookeeper can guarantee that the local replicas never disagree and they are not diverging from the actual state. When the leader receives a write request, it calculates what the state of the system is when the write is to be applied and transforms this into a transaction that captures the new state. Okay, I repeat. When a leader receives a write request, it calculates what is the state of the system when the write requests have come, and it transforms this into a transaction that captures the new state. So we can download the Zookeeper application from the link that I have mentioned on my slide. To set up a Zookeeper in a standalone environment, it's very straightforward. What you need to do is, the server which is contained in a single jar file which you can download from the above link, you need to have a configuration file for that. So once you download a stable version of a Zookeeper from the above link, you need to unpack it, that is unjar it, and then do a cd to the root directory after you unpack the package. To start the Zookeeper, you need a configuration file which is named here called zoo.cfg. It is placed in conf folder of the unpacked release. So in this zoo.cfg, there are three important parameters here which I have highlighted. So the first parameter is tick time. So this is the basic unit in milliseconds which is used by Zookeeper. It is used to do heartbeats, and the minimum session timeout will be twice of the tick time. Next is data dir. This is the location to store the in-memory database snapshots, and unless otherwise specified, the transaction log of the updates to the DB. The next is client port. This is the port to listen for client connections. Once you configure these three parameters of zoo.cfg, you can start the Zookeeper the following way. You need to invoke a shell script zkserver.sh, and to that you have to pass a parameter called start. So zkserver.sh space start. This will start the Zookeeper for you. Once the Zookeeper is started and it is running, you have several options for connecting to it. One option is, for Java base, you can call this shell script called zkcli.sh. So you have to call zkcli.sh -server, and you have to give IP:port number to connect to it. So since Zookeeper we have just started on a local machine, I am giving the IP of the local machine. :2181 is the port on which we started the Zookeeper. So 2181 was the client port, and 2181 is what I have specified here. So using zkcli.sh, you can connect to the Zookeeper that we just started here, and we have to pass the server where Zookeeper is started, that is this, and we have a client port 2181, so I have specified it here while connecting. So once you connected to Zookeeper using zkcli.sh, now this prompt shows that it is connected. Then if you do ls command for a root, it will tell you what exactly is saved in a root namespace. Okay. So now that we have started a Zookeeper and using zkcli.sh we have connected to a Zookeeper on port 2181, let's try out simple basic commands using the command line interface to get the feel of it. So on the previous slide we have seen ls command, which will list the contents of a particular node in Zookeeper namespace, right? So now the next command that we'll try is create. So create command creates a new Z node by running command in the following way. So this command creates a new Z node by name zkTest and associates string my data with the node. So as you should see, I gave create, name of the node and the data to associate with this node. So it mentioned that it created zk_test for you. Now if I just type ls root, then I get Zookeeper and zk_test. So Zookeeper was already created on the previous slide, right? When I did ls slash, it showed you Zookeeper. Now I created zk_test. So it created zk_test folder, which you can see here in the ls command. Now let's verify whether my data string that I have asked to associate with zk_test have actually been associated or not. We can get that by using a command called get followed by the folder name. So get zk_test. It gives you the entire data that is associated with node zk_test. So what is the length of my data? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if you just see, data length is 7. So that's a confirmatory test that my data which we had requested to associate to zk_test have actually been associated. So the get command gives you the data associated with a particular node. You can also change the data associated with zk_test by using a set command that we'll see on the next slide here. So now using set command, I'm associating zk_test with a new data called junk. What is the size of junk? 1, 2, 3, 4. So the data length is 4. Okay. So when we do set zk_test with a junk, it will set the data, and you can confirm that zk_test has indeed been updated by issuing a get command. And on issuing a get command, I get this. Okay. So data length is 4. By doing a get command, if I'm verifying that zk_test was indeed updated by getting a new string junk assigned to it. Okay. Then the next command is delete. When I say delete zk_test, it removes this node from the namespace. Now if I again type ls root, it just shows me Zookeeper, and the zk_test that was created up has been gone now, right? So that's all we had on a Zookeeper. Now in the next session, we'll see how to run Zookeeper in replicated mode. So now we'll see how to run Zookeeper in replicated mode. Running the Zookeeper in a standalone mode that we have just seen before is convenient for the evaluation, some development and testing. But in actual production environment, you should run Zookeeper in a replicated mode. A replicated group of servers in the same application is called quorum. I repeat, a replicated group of servers in the same application is called a quorum. And in replicated mode, all servers in the quorum have copies of the same configuration file. The file is similar to the one used in standalone mode, but with very few differences, and that I've mentioned in this slide. So the configuration that we have discussed before is tick time, data dir, and client port. Remaining configurations are new. So what are those? First is init limit. Init limit is timeouts that Zookeeper uses to limit the length of the time Zookeeper servers in the quorum have to connect to a leader. I repeat, init limit is timeouts Zookeeper uses to limit the length of the time Zookeeper servers in the quorum have to connect to the leader. And the entry sync limit limits how far out of the date a server can be from a leader. Sync limit limits how far out of date a server can be from a leader. With both these timeouts, you specify the unit of time using tick time. Okay. So then we have the entries of the form server.x, which lists the servers that make up the Zookeeper service. When the server starts up, it knows which server it is by looking for the file myid in the data dir. Okay, so when the server starts, it knows which server it is by looking for a file named myid in the data directory. So this file contains the server number in the ASCII format. So in the first server, that file will contain number 1. Second server, that file will contain number 2. Third server, that file will contain number 3. So based on that, each server knows which server it is in a cluster of servers. And finally, there are two different ports which are mentioned here. What are those? So the peers in a particular Zookeeper cluster use the first port to connect to other peers. I repeat, peers in a Zookeeper cluster connect to each other peers using the first port mentioned in the configuration. Such a connection is necessary so that peers can communicate with each other, for example, to agree upon the order of updates. More specifically, a Zookeeper server uses this port to connect to followers to the leaders. So Zookeeper uses this port to connect followers to the leaders. I repeat, Zookeeper uses this port to connect followers to the leaders. When a new leader arises, follower opens a TCP connection to the leader using this port. I repeat, when a new leader arises, the follower opens a TCP connection to the leader using this port. Because the default leader election always also uses TCP, we currently require another port for leader election. Okay, so when a new leader arises, follower opens a TCP connection to the leader using the first port mentioned here. But leader election also uses a TCP. For that we require another port, right? So for leader election we require another port, and that is the second port mentioned here. Okay. So with this we are completed on the Zookeeper contents. Now we can switch back to Apache Storm to learn more about its components. So see you in the next presentation. Thank you.